Hello everybody, my name's Joe Quick and this is Joe's Quick Review. Are you ready to join me on the road to hell? Quite literally, today we are playing Meifumado, which translates roughly as the road to hell, and the game lives up to its name, as does its development journey. Fair warning, this video includes graphic content such as dismemberment, alcohol, sharp objects and other adult things, so please don't continue watching if you're likely to find it upsetting. There's nothing sexy on the road to hell, just a lot of blood. Developed by Old Bit Studios, Meifumado is an action role-playing game set in a post-apocalyptic world inspired by Japan. The gameplay has an in-depth combat system where a lot of buttons do a lot of things and the timing of attacks is critical. It also has some light platforming elements as you traverse the world. As I played, I compared it to a lot of other games, but I think the 80s classics Prince of Persia and Karateka, set in the world of Mortal Kombat, would be a pretty good summarisation of what to expect. You travel through the world and more often than not encounter enemies that will beat the chi out of you. Picking up a nice variety of weapons including your sword, bow, kunai and bombs, you can tackle these fights in a number of different ways. Some weapons will do a lot more damage than others, as will certain attacks, but the attacks cost chi and the stronger weapons make a rare appearance, so you need to use these strategically in order to progress to the later stages of the game. The game is short and I beat it in just over 4 hours, so if you're actually any good at it, you could probably do it in an hour or so. It's not dissimilar to an old school arcade machine that wants to eat all your coins. You're going to die a lot, but it promises you a win on that next try. Thankfully, there is no permadeath that will see you return to the start of the game, and you can't enter any rude initials if you do successfully make it to the end. This game does ramp up quickly in difficulty, and it's not that the fights get that much harder, but you run short on resources and the space between save points seem to double in length each time you pass one. Towards the end of the game, you'll find yourself having 20 to 30 fights before you can save, or at least that's what it feels like. As I mentioned in my last review, it's a horrible design and really frustrating to have to do the same thing over and over again, but if you play this and you get there, I wish you luck. The game definitely has an 80s vibe about it, and the developers have created some really nice pixelated scenes and characters to bring this world to life. The level of detail and all the little features that can easily be overlooked really give volume to the landscape. This is a good looking game, but it doesn't carry across into every environment. Some of the locations look dull and dry and others feel really repetitive. There is a stage in the game where you're exploring a cave and it is very easy to get disorientated. There is a map, but we'll talk about that later. I do like the fact that you can find inventory items integrated into the scene as well. Arrows stuck in a tree or some bread on the table can be picked up and stored. Not only does this add character and variation to the scene, it makes a nice change from finding everything stored in a chest. With the exception of the main character's walking cycle, which might be better suited to Robocop, the animations are spot on. Not only that, but everything is accounted for. Nothing magically appears in the character's hands, and people don't flip 90 degrees when KO'd. Walking like a robot, unsheathing sword, walking with sword, switching to bow, aiming bow, eating chicken, drinking soup, slicing a samurai in half. Again, the same level of detail as mentioned in the graphics. I love this level of quality and I think it really pays off. Unfortunately, because of the issues with development, the in-game story isn't even a scratch on the surface of what the developers intended it to be. We're told by someone that we're a master assassin and the Shogun wants us dead, or we want to kill the Shogun, something like that. Then we set off on a journey, there are zombies, then an arena, we climb a tower and the end. It doesn't have a lot of context. In a way, this still gives me that 80s vibe. Because they didn't have the disk space to add a lot of the story and lore into the game, they put all of those details in the game manual. My younger self would never look at the manual, I just wanted to play. Beat up the bad guy, job done. Who cares about the story anyway, right? Of course, that is all a thing of the past now. They could have included a page in the menu to provide you with the backstory, but they didn't. So here it is. The island of Yamatai is left lying in ruins after the devastating impact of the global war. The war continues as several rival factions compete for control over the island. You must ascend the throne and reclaim this land as your own. And fight. Again, they had a lot more planned, but it didn't make it into the game, so I'm not going to mention it here. Let's hope that they can release a fuller product somewhere down the line. The game interface is simplicity at its finest. You have 3 gauges in the corner of the screen, from top to bottom: health in red, concentration in yellow, and chi in grey. Health is self-explanatory. The concentration bar is how long you can hold your focus for when blocking. Lose your focus and your health will take a hit. The less health you have, the longer the concentration bar will take to regenerate. I didn't look at this bar once when I played, so I don't feel like it has a significant impact on gameplay. You need to attack to survive, so there's no point holding down the block button. And the dodge function works just as well, if not better. And finally, the chi bar allows you to perform special moves. This can be restored from the in-game menu, which is a little harder to navigate. If you hit the menu button, it will open a panel to the side, showing your inventory. You can switch between categories of weapon, armour, projectiles, health, and other items using the trigger buttons. You can highlight an item with the D-pad and then choose to use it or equip it using the left action button, or add it to your quick access item using the top action button. In-game, you can only see your quick access items via the icon in the corner, and you can switch between these using the right toggle stick. The last icon on the screen that looks like an arrow lets you know how many arrows you have left. This game only works with a controller, and the controls aren't easy. It does a good job of teaching you the basics at the start of the game, and the navigational controls are pretty standard, but when they go on to explain how the other UI elements work, you're provided with a page of detail in fairly poor English. Remember it well because you won't see it again. Even if you go to the controls in the menu, this isn't listed anywhere. If anything, you'll be left more confused as the same key is assigned to multiple functions. Of course, you can experiment, but then you're going to use up that much needed chi bar. You can generally make it through the game using the attack, dodge and roll buttons, but it might take a bit longer and probably won't be as fun. One thing that felt quite foreign to me was not using the left toggle to move the player. You have to use the left and right on the D-pad. At first, I justified this because there are so many button configurations. I assumed the left toggle must do something else. But no, it does nothing. And I suspect that created another challenge for me when trying to react quickly compared to what I am used to. A slight correction here, as if you press the left toggle down, it will in fact open the map. Not only that, but from the map you can view the special moves. See? There, behind the map. Why you wouldn't think to look there is beyond me, but at least our left toggle has some purpose. And another correction I discovered just before publishing this video: you can play with a gamepad or a keyboard, but these are not interchangeable. If a gamepad is connected to your computer and discoverable, the game will not acknowledge the keyboard. I would strongly recommend playing with a gamepad, however. The keyboard definitely doesn't make things any easier. Surprisingly, given the lack of story or any of the usual features you would replay a game for, I myself would be tempted to revisit this one down the line. By the time I reached the end of the game, I felt like I had just about got to grips with the controls, so it'd be interesting to play it again now that I know how to play. Not only that, but the game offers a variety of weapons and challenges throughout. If they had an arena mode with randomised weapons and opponents, then you have an unlimited amount of replayability right there. The most satisfying part of this game was defeating your opponents and moving on to the next stage. If only. But not much to revisit apart from the combat, so it depends if that's your cup of tea or not. The game has a very atmospheric soundtrack, which very quickly gets drowned out by the clanging of swords and the shuffling of feet. Honestly, if you'd asked me before I watched the recording, I would have said it didn't have any music. You get so involved in the sword fighting and the foot shuffling that it seems to just turn into background noise. If it wasn't there, I don't know if it would be missed. The swinging and clashing of swords, however, is very much noticeable, and again, atmospheric, creating a lot of character in the fighting sequences. Even if you close your eyes, you can feel the intensity of a battle. And to prove a point, if you close your eyes, I'll play that clip again. Let's not talk about accessibility. I've got all my fingers and thumbs and no disabilities that I'm aware of, which I'm thankful for, but this game is hard. The action is fast paced, the controls are complicated, and they're not configurable. Platforms are difficult to identify as the colour palette for a scene is often greys or browns. The only thing it might have in its favour is the sound effects. As previously mentioned, there isn't much music, and all the action sound effects feature quite prominently, so in true samurai fashion, you may fare better in fights with your eyes closed. The Kickstarter for this project was a little bit different to most, and there are definitely lessons to be learned here. The project launched in March 2022, and after funding, the project team were never heard from again. That is until May 2024. If you aren't aware of how Kickstarter works, you support a project by offering financial support at a certain pledge level to help the developers in creating their vision. In return, they will generally give you some kind of reward for your pledge, for example, a copy of the game or your name in the credits. If the project is successful, they take your pledge, and then it is up to the developers to fulfill those pledges. But in there lies the gamble. If the developers have under-budgeted the project, or alternatively, they may just be scammers, then you may end up with nothing in return. Don't let that scare you off. I've backed nearly 600 projects and only 3 or 4 of them have let me down. Just be aware of the risks involved and how much you can afford to invest. Old Bit Studios had big plans for Meifumado, and what you can see on the screen right now is the trailer for their game. Obviously, when I saw this, I thought the game looked great, and I threw in my pledge for a copy of the game. But after a year of not hearing from the developers, people started throwing the usual comments. This project is dead, looks like it was a scam. Surprisingly, a year later, we received a response explaining the whole situation. The team were from a country outside of Kickstarter's permitted funding region. So they partnered up with a company outside of their country so that they could run the crowdfunding campaign. When this project was funded, March 2022, a certain war in Eastern Europe had also escalated, causing global panic and obviously impacting financial trade in addition to all sorts of other chaos. So apparently, they are still fighting a long fight to try and claim their funding. So if you are thinking of backing a project on Kickstarter, do be conscious of who and what you are backing. I'm not trying to frighten you, but there are risks involved. If you are planning to run a Kickstarter, be honest and open with your backers, and ultimately, be sure to keep them updated even if things aren't going the way you had hoped. For the most part, they are a very supportive crowd, but obviously nobody wants to feel like they have been tricked. I wouldn't say the devs turned their luck around and created something awesome, but they still put in the work and managed to produce a product even if it doesn't match up to the promised design, so you have to respect them for not giving up on the project and hope that maybe someday they can release the game they intended to design. When you look at the amount of content visible in the trailer, however, it's disappointing they didn't find some way to squeeze it into the game they released. Given the fact that this isn't the game the developers had intended to make, at least not the full version in all its glory, talking about the game design seems a bit redundant. Regardless, there are a few things I would highlight if you are looking for inspiration. Hopefully I've captured the game's better qualities in my review so far. There are so many things that could have been adjusted to make this a better experience. And despite the fact that they were trying to produce this on a reduced budget, timeframes, etc., they definitely could have been improved upon. Let's start with the story. The functionality is in place, but the plot is missing. Who, what, when, where, and why are the fundamental points of a story. Who am I, and what is my purpose? What gives my actions meaning? They even throw in a little social interaction midway through the game, but it doesn't add anything. don't force feed people information in bulk that they probably won't remember and then can't revisit the instruction, unless of course they're looking at the map. Also, in the interest of accessibility, don't reference an object such as the yellow bar when people may not know where the yellow bar is or be able to identify the colour. The game was intended to have crafting mechanics, which is why you'll notice you can pick up multiple weapons of the same type, which presumably you would have sold or melted down to get something better. But as that functionality isn't in the game, this feature probably shouldn't be either. As I played, not knowing the development history, I was constantly waiting for this shop to appear. It just created confusion. Why are they there if I can't do anything with them? All simple fixes that could have been addressed in this release. Another example is the save point. You press the right toggle to save the game, but there is no feedback to suggest you have saved at all, with the exception of a slight pause in the controls. Not much work is needed for this statue to flash, a little save icon, something to feed back to the player that it was a success. This became a growing concern as the game progressed and the save points got much further apart. And one final correction to be made here. When you save, the statue does light up, but only when you are playing with the keyboard, meaning that the keyboard button has been configured to trigger the animation, but the gamepad button has not. Any small amount of playtesting should have captured this, and hopefully they will implement a quick fix to address the problem for future players. It's a shame this isn't the game it was meant to be, and despite being quite short, I did find the gameplay quite enjoyable once I'd got the hang of it. It can be unforgiving in a lot of areas, but if you can be patient and persistent, I suspect you'll get some satisfaction from overcoming the fights, and if you're a fan of violent games, all the pixelated death sequences. The game is currently only available on Steam. The developers have stated that they want to release on other platforms, but it could be a long time before we see that happen. Let us know what you think of this game, or have you also experienced a Kickstarter horror story? But that's it for today. Thanks for watching, keep gaming, and I'll catch you next time.